Hello everyone, this is Amanda. This is video 5 of the Exam 2 Study Guide series. Excuse the glare, I'm sorry, I'm trying to adjust the glare, but it's from my computer. So, so for this video, we're going to be talking about 4 different activities to help improve fluency. First things first, what is fluency? At least in aspects to teaching. So fluency in a teacher's case is how fast or slow a student is able to read. So at least that's the definition I came up with that I feel like helps me remember. But yeah, fluency essentially is how fast is a student reading? Are they reading really, really fast, or are they reading really, really slow? What's their pace level at? How many words are they reading per minute? So that's kind of what fluency is. And then my professor, he would like us to describe 4 different activities to help improve students' reading fluency. So I was very fortunate to find some examples in one of the PowerPoints my professor gave us. Hopefully these are helpful. So the first activity that I saw in the PowerPoint is scaffolded silent reading. So essentially what this is before the students are reading or after the students are silently reading, or probably during. This is probably more of a during their reading. You stop them and you give them kind of like a mini lesson that focuses on a main skill. Actually, you might want to do that before the reading so then they can practice that skill. So before the reading, in my opinion, when you're doing scaffolded silent reading, you would give a mini lesson on the skills that you want students to focus on when they're reading. One of the focuses could be like chunking information, although depending on the grade that might be helpful, it might not, or maybe finding different vocab words or words that they don't know what they are, or find difficult trying to understand. You can teach them to like highlight those words to come back to. Another scaffold type reading is maybe identifying different characters. For example, if you have a book that is almost like a chapter book, but there's some pictures still in it, you could have students write in a post-it note which character is which based upon what they read in the text so far, and maybe give them a post-it note, and then they write the names of each character and point an arrow towards each one that they think is that particular character. So that's kind of what I believe scaffolded silent reading is. Next one is videotaping/audio taping. I personally like this activity because one, you can do this even today during this COVID-19 crisis that we're still in the middle of right now. You can do this using like Flipgrid. I've used Flipgrid in some of my classes, and even the host teacher that I'm observing, she quite recently started using Flipgrid and her students love it. But essentially students can either record themselves as they're reading, although I probably wouldn't use Flipgrid because you only get like 3 minutes, but students can record themselves reading, and whether that's via video or on audio where you're just hearing their voices, and then they can listen to themselves on how they're reading. Listen to how they're reading and adjust how fast or how slow they're reading based on what they're listening or watching. So that's kind of what videotaping/audio taping their reading is for that activity, and that one's actually pretty fun. I think that's a creative way to do it. Radio reading. Radio reading, that one's new to me because I've actually never heard of radio reading. I actually had to look it up, what radio reading is. And from my understanding, according to the teacher, it's where the teacher kind of is getting excited about reading, and the students are are kind of doing kind of like an echo read, but it's a little more dramatized, essentially, and the kids can kind of act out what they're reading. Another version of radio reading that I saw, again, this kind of confused me a little bit, because the first one was according to my professor that I looked on his computer, or not on his computer, on the PowerPoint, and we actually did some practice, I think, where we were reading these different poems, and the teacher, our professor, he read one part, and then we read another, and we kind of got to be really creative and acting out on how we're reading, and it's actually really fun. But another version of radio reading that I looked up was students get into small groups, and they're kind of given different sections of a reading, and each student gets a chance to lead a discussion about what they read. So there's actually different versions of radio reading. I personally liked my professor's version of radio reading because it was fun and it was more entertaining, but I feel like maybe that's more for younger students, whereas the older students might benefit more from the older version of radio reading, where it's each student gets a paragraph and then they lead in a discussion where those students get to lead a discussion by answering questions that they came up with themselves. So that's kind of what radio reading is, and for at least the two versions that I managed to look up. Either or, both are great opportunities to encourage students to read using radio reading. Depending on the grade level, you might have to adjust your radio reading. So that's just the third activity. And then the last activity is sustained silent reading. Personally, I wouldn't like that one, to be honest, especially if you're trying to help the student with their pacing or their fluency. I don't know if silently reading by themselves is very helpful, but essentially, at least what I think sustained silent reading is very similar to scaffolded silent reading, is where you give students kind of a skill to focus on to help them when it comes to fluency. But in this case, they're doing it on their own, whereas the scaffolded silent reading is more with the teacher. But yeah, that's kind of another one that was on the PowerPoint as well, was sustained silent reading. Again, personally, I don't know if I would use that one. But yeah. And then another activity that I actually didn't write on here, but that I thought might be helpful, and I actually mentioned it in one of my other past videos, is where in the book, either the teacher or the students highlight each of the punctuation marks, whether it's a period, a question mark, or an exclamation point, and essentially that's to help them pause with what they're reading, so they're not continuously reading run-on sentences forever and ever and ever. I don't know if that has a name for it. I just call it highlighting punctuation. And my mom actually did this with my brother when he was being homeschooled. And it helped him at least slow down on his reading, because what he would do is he would read so fast, he would get through the chapter, but he would have no idea what he read. So essentially what my mom hoped to do was, when she highlighted in a certain color that would catch my brother's eye, his brain and himself would know, hey, I need to stop for a second, breathe, and then continue reading. And it actually helped him pace his reading a lot better. He still struggles with the comprehension point, but I feel like a lot of students always struggle with comprehension, so that's kind of normal. But definitely with his reading, though, he does tend to just read forever and ever and ever and ever, and he won't take a minute to breathe. So I feel like that, if that was an activity to use, you can definitely use that one as well. But there's many other fluency readings as well that you as teachers can do. Like there's choral reading, where the whole class is reading together. That one I would probably use for smaller students. Echo reading, where the teacher reads one sentence and then the students are going to repeat the sentence after the teacher. Buddy reading is probably very good, especially when you partner a student who probably has a higher fluency level, or not a higher fluency level, but their fluency is at grade level while there's another student who needs extra help. Definitely you can partner those two up together, and it can kind of be like a peer tutor moment. And then and even just the teacher simply just doing a modeling exercise where or even like alternative reading, where the teacher will model first on how the students need to read, like how fast or how slow they need to read. And that, again, the teacher can point out when I stop, when I see a punctuation mark, whether it's a question mark, a period, or an exclamation point, I need to stop, take a breath, and then continue reading the next sentence. So there's all sorts of activities that you can do. Those were just a couple that I wrote down, and then others that I listed that I thought would be helpful. I know it said only 4 activities, but there's a lot. There's a lot more than 4. But those are just some of the few that I know that I feel like would be helpful, and some new ones that I didn't even know existed, but I think are interesting. Whatever the case may be, you as the teacher need to know your students, what gets them motivated to read, what do they like, what do they not like, and have fun with it. Try to be as enthusiastic about reading as possible, because I know sometimes there's some students that like reading is boring, and that's kind of what might make them turn off from reading, especially with their fluency. So be excited. Don't be afraid to make mistakes, take a chance, take a risk, and have fun with it. Go with the flow. Alrighty, that is 4 activities to improve fluency, and probably more activities that I listed without meaning to. But I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one. And goodbye.